This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer.
Sean Spicer will be getting a new position.
A decorated veteran, a political strategist, and he knows Washington inside and out.
Just like Sean Spicer.
The Spicer era.
Sean Spicer.
The Full Court Press is on the air. Now, here's Sean Spicer.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to Full Court Press. I'm your host, Sean Spicer, here on WABC. We've got a great show coming your way. I'm really excited. We do a little bit of a political recap because it was a big week in politics. And frankly, some of the actions taken this week will affect what's going to happen in a couple weeks in a state called Texas. But a lot to break down on the primaries that happened over this weekend and where we are. Vice President Vance taking to the briefing room. I'll break that down as well with you. And then some interesting stuff from Democrats that they never cease to amaze me. They really don't. They are freaking out because I remind people of this all the time. Democrats will do anything to get in and stay in power. And when I mean anything, they'll change the rules. They get upset with Republicans, but there's a finite difference that really never gets acknowledged. And that difference is this. You look at what like the Republicans have done, right? They'll play by the rules. They go to the court system. And then the Democrats will say, well, we don't like that. So we'll just pack the court. We'll change the system. That's happening, on the Voting Rights Act. It's happening in California. I'll break that down for you. And then a little later on, I do want to get into California because this is really amazing what's happening out there in California. If you had told me at the beginning of this cycle that we had the potential to put a Republican in the governor's mansion and mayor of LA, I would say that you are smoking something. Legal, of course. But I mean, this is insane. The idea that Republicans, after all the stuff that we're talking about and people, the head wins this and the head wins that, potentially could pick this off. Now, admittedly, there's some uniqueness to this. So I'll break that all down for you. But I do want to recap kind of where we are. If you think about where this started with the redistricting, these Indiana state senators went against Donald Trump. They said, we're not going to redistrict. We're better than this. We know better. We don't want to play by the same rules that the Democrats are playing by to try to redistrict everything. And again, you guys, especially in the New York area, know more than everyone else. When the Democrats say that Republicans started this, remember last cycle, they tried to do this in New York. It was the Supreme Court of New York that stopped the Democrats. Maybe we didn't stop them. The court did. But they don't like to remind people of that. But these state senators, Trump went in there and said, fine, you want to defy me? Great. I'll run people against you. And they did. And they were unbelievably successful. Even Trump's greatest detractors were very clear that what they did in Indiana was a big deal. And then comes along this race in Louisiana. Now, Senator Bill Cassidy, longtime senator, he's chairman of the Senate Help Committee. That's Health, Education, and Labor, and pensions. And he's the guy that the MAHA agenda has to go through, all of this, RFK plus all of the other agenda stuff. And so Cassidy voted to impeach Trump and then, oh, by the way, sucked up to him. It was like, I know I said that think about this. You want to impeach somebody, you're saying, I don't think you should serve. And by the way, when you get impeached, you should never serve again. You can never serve again. You're out. Full on out. And then Bill Cassidy tried to suck up to Trump like, hey, sorry, I tried to kick you out of office and make sure you could never run again. And then Trump wins again and he sucks up to him. So I say all that because Trump said, fine, I'm going to endorse this woman, Julia Letlow. She's a member of Congress. She succeeded her husband when he passed away in the House of Representatives representing Louisiana. And she crushes it. She almost gets 50%. Now, John Fleming, the state treasurer, who had previously served in Congress and was a deputy chief of staff of Trump under Mark Meadows, he comes in second. Louisiana's a jungle primary. If you don't get 50, the top two go on. But Bill Cassidy, sitting longtime United States senator, comes in third place. Now, I'm not talking photo finish third place. He got a quarter of the vote. He barely got a quarter of the vote. A quarter. Think about that. 75% of Louisiana primary voters said, I don't want this guy to continue serving me. And he's a powerful chairman. This is the kind of stuff that normally like politicians come home and say, I get to bring home the bacon. I get to do so much. They rejected him massively, massively. Okay, so chalk those two things up. So you got Indiana, then you got Cassidy. Then what happens earlier this week, or sorry, last week, because technically it's Sunday. I get it. So, but Tom Massey goes down in Kentucky. And Massey thought to himself that he could pull this off. He was very defiant. I'm going to win this race. This is all me. I'm going to pull this out. And he gets crushed by 10 points by Ed Galardi, who is a former Navy SEAL. Now, AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, even went after him. It was the most expensive primary in U.S. history. 30-something million bucks. But Massey gets crushed by 10 points. The takeaway, and this wasn't just that, like you look at the other primaries in Georgia and Alabama, Donald Trump made it very clear that his endorsement is gold. Everywhere around in Georgia, the Trump endorsed candidate crushed it. Alabama, Trump endorsed candidate. And in Georgia, by the way, Brian Kemp, who a lot of people are like, oh, Brian Kemp's could be such a huge Senate candidate if we could get him to run. All of his candidates got crushed. His nominee to succeed him as governor, Brad Raffensperger, remember him, the Secretary of State? He didn't even make the runoff. Guy's a statewide office holder and doesn't make the runoff. Absolutely embarrassing. So what's next? Well, I get tipped off in the middle of the day earlier last week, and I get told he's endorsing Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, who is running against John Cornyn in the Senate seat. Now, let me just take you back 1 second. So there's the initial primary, and Cornyn, who has been in office forever. He was the Attorney General prior to being a senator forever, is in this runoff. And remember, it was a three-way. Wesley Hunt, Congressman, Ken Paxton, Attorney General, and John Cornyn run. You need to get 50%. No one thought that was going to happen. And Paxton, I think, did a lot better than anybody thought. And that night, the big rumor was that Trump was going to go in and endorse Cornyn because all these folks in the D.C. establishment said, Mr. Trump, Ken Paxton can't win statewide against Tallarico, even though he's a complete lunatic, left-wing, crazy nut job that talks about God being non-binary and that we have a porch of a border that people should be welcome to come into. I mean, honest to God, these are the things that this guy Tallarico says. And they were like, oh, Mr. Trump, Mr. President, you can't let Ken Paxton win the primary because, well, he'll cost us a ton of money, and John Cornyn could win statewide. So that night, you don't see an endorsement. Next night, no endorsement. And Paxton did something absolutely brilliant. And I'm bound to say this because, again, all these political people just overlooked the game of chess that Paxton played. Do you remember this? He says, Paxton tweets out, if the Senate passes the Save America Act, I will drop out. And when I saw this happen, I thought to myself, what the heck is going on? It was absolutely brilliant what he did. Absolutely brilliant. And no one's remembering it now, which is why I'm telling you about this, because Trump was on the precipice at that moment. At that very moment, there were so many people in the Trump orbit and high-level donors, everyone saying, Trump, you got to endorse Cornyn. And from everything that I know, he was pretty darn close to doing that. But Paxton does this checkmate move, and he says, I'll tell you what. If John Cornyn can get his colleagues to pass the Save America Act for the good of this thing, I will drop out. But here's the dirty secret. And again, this is what no one got, guys. This is it. He knew that Cornyn couldn't pull it off. He knew it. So he creates this scenario for Trump, which is, hey, go let this guy try. Don't just hang tight. Don't endorse just yet. Let's see if he can pull it off. And Paxton knew full well that Cornyn couldn't do it. And so what happens? They spin their wheels, they make a bunch of excuses, and sure enough, they don't pass it. But in that time, from when he sent out that initial tweet saying, Mr. President, just buy me some time. Let the Senate try to do it. You know what happened? Poll after poll after poll came out showing that Ken Paxton was in the same exact place as John Cornyn. So the whole theory that the DC establishment tried to portray Ken Paxton as not being able to Tallarico, but Cornyn could, was completely BS. Completely BS. John Thune reacted, I think his buddy in leadership comes out, and I want to play you a little bit about what he had to say. Take a listen to John Thune, the current majority leader, reacting to President Trump's endorsement of Ken Paxton.
Given that you've spent months trying to persuade the president to endorse John Cornyn in the Texas primary, and given that the NRSC has invested heavily to help Cornyn win that primary, how personally disappointed or frustrated are you with the president's decision to endorse Ken Paxton today?
Well, I think you all know my position on this issue. I've made it very clear for months now. And Senator Cornyn is a principled conservative. He is a very effective senator for the state of Texas. And but none of us control what the president does. He made his decision about that. That doesn't change the way I feel. And I am certainly will continue to be supportive of Senator Cornyn.
All right. Obviously, a little disappointment there in the D.C. establishment because they want Cornyn to stick around. But Paxton's going to be the guy. And then Cornyn, he couldn't help himself. I think he knows he's dead man walking. I mean, I do. But this is Senator Cornyn reacting to Trump's endorsement of Ken Paxton. Take a listen.
Well, we've always had these family fights within the Republican Party, and then we unify in order to win the election in November. And we'll do that again. But I believe that in terms of our success in November, that Ken Paxton would be an albatross around the neck of our candidates and would likely lose to James Tallarico. I think we've come too far and worked too hard to risk that.
Now, I got to tell you something. The sources that I talk to believe, the Cornyn sources that I talk to, 100% believe in every fiber of their being that if Trump had stayed out, they could have won. Okay, I just want to make sure you heard. They believe, the Cornyn folks believe, if they could have just gotten Trump not to endorse going into this June final runoff, that they could have pulled it off. They had so much money. I don't buy that. I just don't. Everyone I talk to in Texas says, no way, Jose. Paxton had the grassroots support. You have all this money. There's no question how much money Cornyn had. But the people I talk to, the activists, the grassroots supporters, they were very clear. Paxton has the momentum and the support of the MAGA movement, the grassroots. And in the president's endorsement, by the way, he made it clear. He even said, John Cornyn's a nice guy. He's a good man, is I think his direct quote. But he made it very clear. I remember when Ken Paxton was there for me in the darkest times. Thick and thin from the jump. And he's right. The funny part about this, guys, is I got so many people saying, well, why? Why did he do it? He could have just stayed out of this. You're right. He could have. But I think the Paxton people made the case, Mr. President, all the polling now shows I'm in the same place. I can win this the same as I'm in the same exact place as Cornyn. There's no difference. This narrative is complete BS. And he was right. I don't think there's any question in my mind. Yes, we will go through the primary, but at this point, the question now is how much does John Cornyn lose by? I just don't. I don't see it. I as I said, I don't buy the narrative that they could have won in the first place. I just don't. But the reality is it is now over. So this is another huge win for the president. And as I said, it's you go through this list that I just gave you, Tom Massey, Bill Cassidy, the Indiana state senators, plus all the primary victories from Alabama to Kentucky and Georgia. The Trump endorsement is the good housekeeping seal of approval in politics. All right. Anyway, we've got a great show coming your way. I want to highlight the vice president. He came out, he had his turn at the White House briefing room. And he actually commented on Paxson as well. I'll play for that just a little later in the show. But coming up after the break, Jennifer Galardi is with the Heritage Foundation. She was, as I like to say, MAHA before it was cool. And the Make America Healthy movement is going to be critical, in my opinion, in the midterm elections, getting these folks who are critical to President Trump winning a second term, getting the House of Representatives and the Senate reelected in Republican fashion. So we're going to break down a great conversation on the MAHA movement, what its successes have been, who's done really well, how important it is for the midterm elections right after the break. You're listening to Full Court Press with me, Sean Spicer, here on WABC. We'll be right back.
This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer on 77 WABC.
In business, the best days are when priorities stay on track. The Hartford helps midsize and large companies manage key exposures with insurance and proactive risk solutions, so focus can stay where it belongs. Visit thehartford.com/risk mitigation to learn more.
Get the most out of your vehicle with GM Genuine Parts and AC Delco original equipment. The only parts designed, engineered, tested, and backed by General Motors. You can find your perfect fit for most makes and models and choose from 3 tiers of parts, including GM OE or gold and silver aftermarket parts. Visit gmparts.com for more information.
The Full Court Press is on the air. Now, here's Sean Spicer.
All right, welcome back to Full Court Press. I'm your host, Sean Spicer, here on WABC. You know, one of the big issues that I think is super important as we head towards the midterms is the MAHA movement. It's the largest chapter in my new book, Trump 2.0, because I look at myself as like the typical MAHA type voter. Somebody who I think tried to make decent choices based on what the government and doctors were saying. And what I've seen over the last year is this awareness, this level of transparency about what's actually happening with our health and our wellness, and in many cases, cover-ups that have existed. And I've just been fascinated. And as we head towards the midterms, there's a big question, frankly, how much should we be talking about the MAHA movement? What should we be saying? What should we not be saying? And in order to break this all down, I want to bring in somebody who was MAHA before it was MAHA. Jennifer Galardi is the Senior Policy Analyst for Restoring American Wellness at the Heritage Foundation. Jennifer, thank you for being with us. Obviously, as I said, you were MAHA before it was cool. But several of us, including myself, are now riding this wave. When you look at the issue and its manifestation in the last year and a half, give us a grade where you think the MAHA movement is and what it's accomplished since Trump took office.
Hello, first of all. It's always weird to just jump right into it and be like, hello to your listeners. Thank you for having me. It's like, I love working in this space because, like you said, I was in it as more of a practitioner and a peddler of MAHA ideas before it hit the national scene and hit politics. So I love talking about it. One of my favorite things to do, and I get to work on it, so it's great. As I mentioned to you before, I think I would give it a B+1 because I don't grade on a curve. I'm not the easiest of graders. I think kids need to toughen up a little bit more these days in many ways, physically as well. So I think we've had great success with closing the grass loopholes. I actually was just reviewing an amendment to a bill.
What's the grass loophole? Explain to listeners right now. When you say closing the grass loophole, what does that mean?
Right. Has nothing to do with marijuana. It for the old school grass people. Yeah, no. Although that is an issue as well, but sticking to the FDA standard, it's generally recognized as safe. And initially it started as pretty innocuous, a way to reduce legislation for foods such as baking soda, butter, cream, things your grandmother would have in her pantry. That's kind of the common analogy. Like if your grandmother used it to bake, it's typically fine. So it was initially proposed to not have to run those through the traps of a lot of legislation. But as food became more processed, food companies kind of used it as a loophole to just introduce these chemical products into our food. Things like you have mentioned also before you turn over a protein bar, things you can't pronounce. Monodisaccharide, licorice, all those 20-syllable words that are longer than the LGBT.
Are you saying that monosaccharide just isn't safe?
Yeah.
Are you saying?
It's like the dinosaurs, right? It's like Tonorana Rex or whatever. Anyway, so things like that kind of, what it did is it allowed the food companies to self-proclaim safety. So it didn't have to go through any thorough research on the FDA's part. The food companies would say, hey, we've tested it. By the way, it's safe. Okay, you're great. And that's how, instead of now potato chips having, actually, that's not a great example because even those typically are just some sort of oil and salt and potato chips. But instead of ice cream, right? Do you remember when you had ice cream in the 70s or the 80s? It was cream, butter, well, not butter, cream, vanilla, non-fat milk, just salt maybe. And now it's all of these, again, ingredients you can't pronounce. And so it's one, to enhance the flavor profile. They put these things in there to make them more addictive. I even notice when I have, I'm trying to think of I will use potato chips because there's a brand called Vandy that is making potato chips with just
of course,
potatoes.
I love them.
Yeah, I think it's avocado.
There's 3 ingredients.
No,
it's salt, potatoes. They use oh my gosh, you're catching me off guard, but they are the sister company of MAHA chips. I used to have this down, but yeah, I have
3 ingredients. Yeah.
Right. And I have these all the time, but I always get a kick, Jennifer, when I talk about grass, right? Generally recognized as safe, because again, we're basically saying that we're putting stuff in your food that's generally and I joke with people. Can you imagine getting on a plane and the pilot saying, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. The plane is generally recognized as safe. You'd be like, I'm getting off this thing right now. And yet we allow this in our food.
We've done a cursory check. Go ahead.
But I just, there's, when you stop and think about the idea that for decades we've allowed, the government has basically said, we're just going to allow this stuff. And that's what it is. It's stuff, chemicals in your food that we're going to say are generally recognized as safe. And everyone goes, okay, there's no other facet of life where you'd agree with that. But I just want to, so aside from that, like what else do you think, if you look at the MAHA movement and stuff that Bobby Kennedy and Dr. Oz and Jay Bhattacharya, like what else has sort of, you said, wow, that is unbelievable that or I'm just proud they got that done in the first 16 months.
Flipping the food pyramid.
Flipping the food pyramid.
Yeah.
I mean, think about this. That was, you and I have talked about this in the past, but like South Park had an episode like 10 years prior where they were like, what if we just flip it upside down? No one actually thought that was
They're seriously profits. Because, what's so funny is, though, it's common sense. It really is common sense. Eat real food. And that's the other big win, I think, that has nothing to do with policy, is its messaging. All of a sudden, people are talking about the things they would never have talked about before, metabolic health. And it's not just Kennedy. It's a whole movement of Callie and Casey Means. You have Dr. Oz. You have people that are now almost pseudo-celebrities because of the government positions they hold. I mean, Oz was kind of a celebrity before. And it's interesting the amount of attention on this. I think that is a huge win. I think their graphics, the way they've designed their websites, that speaks a lot to getting the word out. Like I mentioned to you as well, like everyone's like, well, Michelle Obama's My Plate isn't that much different. First of all, it is on many levels, but it fell flat. No one remembers a plate. People, whether, they will never forget the food pyramid because it was just ingrained into everything that came down from the USDA for so long. So let's keep that, but flip it on its head. Very smart.
100%. All right. So let me, speaking of flipping it on its head, let me flip the question on its head, Jennifer. Sure. What is it that within the MAHA movement that you were hopeful would get done that hasn't?
This is where my B plus comes in. But I don't think, and I didn't give you a grade, but it's a B plus, because I think there's always room for improvement. Yeah, I think there's always room for improvement.
Definitely not taking your class, by the way. I'm not Jennifer Galardi, not taking the class. I'm not going to Heritage Foundation for my diploma because you're clearly a tough grader. But so what is the issue that is giving you the B plus instead of the A?
Well, I think we have to be realistic, right? We've had some wins, but we've also had big challenges. One of those is
like
with
what?
Vaccines. Tried to kind of switch it up, and it hasn't polled well, according to some polls. It depends on the poll that you look at. The general kind of popular polling is saying don't touch the vaccines. That's the message that's coming, that the administration is getting. People are too squishy about it. It's too much of a divisive topic. And it's interesting because, we started out well, like, maybe not everyone, people are skeptical of the COVID shot, which is actually not a vaccination. It's mRNA technology. And I thought that maybe that would open the door for more curiosity, more doubt about this childhood vaccine schedule that has 80 some shots on it. But I don't think people are ready yet. I don't know why. I kind of do. I don't know if you know Aaron Series' book. It's called Vaccines Amen. And that amen tells you everything you know about. It's a religion for people. I don't understand why they don't want to question it. Maybe it's the mental roadblock of this is the Trump administration, right? The TDS. Maybe it's just because.
Do you think that Big Pharma? Do you think it's because Big Pharma's got so much money invested in this that they've basically said, hey, we make a ton of money off of this, and we got to make sure that no one undermines that?
Oh, sure. Well, they had the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Safety Act that provided them a liability shield, so people can't sue the vaccine companies.
Yeah, but they also make a ton of money. So you limit the number of shots, you limit the amount of money.
Correct. So that's their incentive. But the fact that, people became skeptical of pharmaceutical companies and vaccines during COVID. So I thought maybe that would I know what their incentives are, but I thought there was enough shenanigans going on that people would be a little bit more open-minded to changing the childhood vaccine schedule. But we saw what happened when Kennedy tried to reform the ACIP. Now it's completely disbanded. There's just a lot of headwinds there. Like you said, the headwinds are the money, right? But I think with enough political support, it's hard. You ask what the headwinds are. It's the money. It's the money in big ag. It's the money in big food. It's the lobbyists. We saw that Cassidy was so bought and paid for by the pharma company. He just kept going. He was one of them. That's the other roadblock, is some of the people in Congress that just hair on fire. Vaccines. That's their thing. So that's going to be a little tougher. And again, though, we've only been at this a year and a half. So
right. That's the thing that
barge around in a day. We didn't get here overnight. It's going to take a long time to undo some of this stuff, or at least override.
I got to be honest with you. I wasn't entirely surprised you said that, but I also thought one of the big issues that folks in MAHA are really disappointed for is this glyphosate. Okay, and an issue with what the administration do. Can you just, for viewers who are like, what's glyphosate? Why is it a big deal to MAHA? Can you kind of give us a 101 on that?
Sure. Glyphosate is essentially weed control. It's what people know mostly as Roundup, is the brand name. It's a general category of pesticides, which includes insecticides, rodenticides, fungicides. It kills weeds. It was a way to stop tillage for farmers. Massive tillage that was harmful to the land. And it did replace other things that were worse, like paraquat, like some other really strong chemicals. So the EPA is supposed to review these things. I think it's every 15 years. It was up for a review. It kind of got stalled. It hasn't been reviewed. And there is sufficient data, enough so that Monsanto, who is now owned by Bayer, ironically, a pharmaceutical company, has been sued and has lost litigation for claims of cancer, mostly non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And that is in cases where someone is exposed to it in direct contact, like a farmer or somebody who's working as a groundskeeper or an area where it's being sprayed. Glyphosate is used in construction zones to kill weeds before they develop. It's used everywhere. I've done a really deep dive on this for what we call a background report for Heritage that will hopefully be ready soon.
What if I just kill weeds in my driveway? Do I need to worry about that?
That's the thing. Well, they have Roundup stopped using glyphosate. This is the problem when you say, oh, get rid of glyphosate. You don't know what's replacing it. So in 2023, Bayer Monsanto stopped putting glyphosate in residential use products as Roundup, but they've like paraquat's back in there. So you always have to ask the question, like, what's going to replace it? I see the biggest problem with glyphosate. Like I said, when I did the deep dive, there was an increase in glyphosate used as a desiccant, which means it's used to dry the crops right before harvesting because it speeds up the time you can harvest. It increases productivity. And because so much of our junk food now has some of these grains in them, I'm thinking, again, this is my gut instinct. I hate to pinpoint it to one product, but it's cereals. Because as a desiccant, glyphosate is only used in a small percentage, but it's all used on rye, barley, wheat, and oats. What's in cereal? And how much cereal have people been eating since the 70s? How much have we moved away from eggs and bacon to processed food, cereal?
So when people, if that's their morning routine, they get up and eat cereal, should they be questioning that?
I would. I mean,
okay. So let me just get back to the question because I don't mean to get off chart. But
that's okay.
But why is there concern about how the administration is handling glyphosate? You said that Monsanto / Bayer isn't using it in the residential. Why? What is the ruling or what actions has or has not the Trump administration taken on glyphosate that's gotten people in the MAHA movement a little upset?
Trump issued an executive order, essentially kind of providing a liability shield. The Bayer Monsanto is seeking this every way they can, legislatively, in the executive branch, in the Supreme Court, there's a case, and saying he wants all glyphosate production moved from China, which is where most of it is, to the United States. I understand that move because for me, if something's being manufactured in China, how are we supposed to monitor it? I mean, as controversial as glyphosate is, I'd rather see it produced here, and then we can say, okay, you can and can't do this. It's very controversial.
So the idea is we at least would know what's in it because we're doing it here domestically as opposed to allowing China to send it to us and then having to wonder what's really in it.
Yeah, and it just allows, I think, better research on it, right? We can inspect labs, we can do all that kind of stuff.
All right. I want to turn, as I said at the outset, to the midterms. Whether it's the vaccines or whatever, there's no question in my mind that the MAHA movement was particularly instrumental in helping Donald Trump return to office. Is the MAHA movement so let me just back up one more step. Midterm elections are base plus elections, and you need your people fired up out there, ready to go, voting, getting people to the polls, putting up signs, making phone calls. In your opinion, is the MAHA movement that was so instrumental in 2024 for the Trump victory excited for the midterms?
I think some of the MAHA movement has lost enthusiasm because of some of the setbacks, particularly around glyphosate. I'm trying to message that just because you lose a battle, you haven't lost the war. There's a lot more battles we need to fight. We need to be working on all fronts. I think they're a little disappointed by the recent news of Massey's being primaried. He was a big champion, particularly when it comes to agriculture and the Farm Bill. So I think it would be helpful if candidates can reinvigorate the MAHA voter by taking MAHA positive positions. One is removing liability shields for glyphosate. So Rep. Luna created an amendment to the Farm Bill that, again, they were seeking a liability shield. She put in an amendment in there and it passed to remove that. I think they can Vaccines is tricky. I think you have to know your district and where your constituents stand, but a lot of the MAHA moms are not happy with that. Keep pushing on food, shifting food policy, making sure. I just saw in the store yesterday that Doritos now has like 2 brands, one of their regular nacho cheese and their ranch that are like no dyes, so you won't get that orange stuff on your hands. I'm not so sure if that will be popular, but I think I really think it's messaging. I think policy can only do so much. The demand needs to be created. It'll be interesting to see.
But the bottom line is, you think if you're a House member or senator up for re-election, you should be leaning into MAHA, right?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's enough, like you said, you need that plus. You have your base plus that's going to get you voted. That squishy middle needs to move left or right. And I want to see that squishy middle move right. And the way you can move them right, like we saw in 2016, is through MAHA. I think you said this, and maybe you just said it, and I missed it, but I don't think Trump would have been elected were it not for Kennedy coming on board. Honestly, I think that tips the scales in his favor.
Right. No, I think, look, you wouldn't have Trump 2.0 if you didn't have the MAHA movement, and you wouldn't have the MAHA movement without Trump 2.0. The last thing I want to ask you, Jennifer, before we go, we are now on our 3rd pick for Surgeon General. Nicole Saphier, she's a Fox doctor, or a Fox contributor that's a doctor. Number one, and I'm really pressed for time, so real quickly, is she MAHA approved? And number 2, does she get the votes?
I think she's MAHA enough. I've spoken with her. She's not MAHA activist first pick. They think she was too soft on vaccines. She's too much of an establishment person. I've spoken with her. I don't agree with that. And I think you need somebody that can get through the health committee, although that's now being chaired by, hopefully Marshall is looking instead of Cassidy. So it probably have an easier go of it, not as much pushback. But politics is all about compromise, and you're going to have to make some compromises.
Okay. Jennifer Galardi from the Heritage Foundation, thank you for all you're doing. Thanks for informing us. And I think this is so important as an issue as we go forward. I enjoy this conversation. Thanks for keep coming back with us. Give us an update where we are as we get closer and closer to the election. All right, guys, when we come back, we got a lot more on Full Court Press with Sean Spicer. Stay with us.
This is Full Court Press with Sean Spicer on 77 WABC.
This episode is brought to you by Credit Karma. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve, helping you monitor your progress and giving you personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on. Download today.
Adobe Firefly is the all-in-one creative studio with AI-powered image and video editing for today's creative process. Built for creators of every kind, Firefly helps you generate, edit, and experiment fast. Because the asks aren't getting smaller, the budgets aren't getting bigger, and the timelines, still tight. With all the best creative AI models in one place, Firefly brings your ideas to life. Unlock a better way to make with Adobe Firefly.
Welcome to your personal briefing. The Full Court Press is on the air. Now, here's Sean Spicer.
All right, welcome back. This is Full Court Press. I'm your host, Sean Spicer. Good Sunday morning to you. A lot happening in the world of politics. I hope you enjoyed that conversation on MAHA, because I got to tell you, when I started writing Trump 2.0, I knew I wanted to do a chapter on MAHA. I went down so many rabbit holes on how much money is being spent by big food, by big pharma, by big ag, and the cover-ups. Jennifer mentioned that grass, right, generally recognized as safe. I did a whole section of this in the book. The idea that there is a bunch of ingredients in our food that is, quote, generally recognized as safe is absolutely insane. I can't get my head around it. But when you start to realize, do you realize the The big pharma spent $10.8 billion with a B dollars in media. Like, so when you see those commercials, or even more so, there's a bunch of, we call like morning reads in DC. Politico has their playbook. Axios has one. Notice, this new organization, they have one. But go look at who the sponsor is. Literally, I don't know, maybe 7 out of 10, 8, I don't know, something like that. Some ridiculous amount are sponsored by pharma. And they're tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars weekly for these sponsorships. They are paying the salaries of these folks, the media organizations. And you can say what you will about how liberal and how much they hate Trump in the media, but they're also not entirely stupid. These guys understand that their paychecks, that their salaries are funded by big pharma. So they're not going to write anything negative. They're going to help cover up this crap that's been going on. And there's a lot of big stuff. I mean, we didn't really get to it from Jennifer, but there is a ton that's happened. President Trump had Mark Cuban in this Trump RX event, and there's a lot of great stuff that's happening in the world of Trump RX. And this is a portal that they're creating to make drugs more affordable. The number one issue for healthcare for most people is the cost of prescription drugs, and the Trump RX is bringing most favored nation pricing to strike the balance. What does that mean? Well, if a company is selling X drug in Canada for $10 or the UK for $8, but here in America for $50, we have now are requiring them to give us what we call most favored nation status, because we get the cheapest deal. You're giving Canada $8, we get $8. You don't get to make the American consumer pay more. And he is multiplying the number of drugs available on Trump RX by 7, adding in a bunch of generics, which is huge for affordability. Take a listen to this conversation that they had.
Cost-effective generic drugs are often available at just a tiny fraction of the price of their brand name equivalents. And in theory, they're the same thing. Sometimes they're better with the same dosage, the same effectiveness, and the same active ingredients. Yet many consumers do not think to ask for them. They don't know about them. By incorporating this massive catalog of low-cost generics at TrumpRx.gov, consumers will now have one source to ensure that they're getting the lowest possible cost on their prescription. So they have a real option now. Today, they have something that they've never had before. They've never had anything like this or even close. With these additions, Trump RX will feature the best and lowest prices on prescriptions used by tens of millions of Americans already. And in some cases, the discounted generics available through Trump RX may be offered at an even lower cash price than the out-of-pocket insurance cost, which has always been the lowest, but we're going to be lower. This means that the TrumpRx.gov should always be your first stop before you go to the pharmacy to pick up your prescription. And
so, again, this market competition is so big, and the thing is that a lot of people have talked about it. They may we when you say things like we could have, should have, a lot of people have said. And Secretary Kennedy commented on that. Take a listen to how he framed this, because it's important to understand the context that people have said this forever that we should do it. It's just that Trump is doing it, and Secretary Kennedy made it very clear.
President Clinton promised to do it. President Biden promised to do it. President Obama promised to do it. President Trump actually got it done. And it's an extraordinary accomplishment. It's an extraordinary legacy for him, and it's a gift to the American people. And I want to thank you again for your vision and for your determination.
I mean, look, there's so many things in Washington, and I don't mean to keep talking about why I wrote Trump 2.0, but part of it is that if you don't, like, politicians made promises all the time. They talked about making NATO pay our fair share. We talked about the trade imbalances that exist. And that's all it was talk. They paid lip service to these issues. And Trump comes in and says, all right, I'm going to get it done. And just does it. And you know, it shows you, it's also like the border, you know, Biden was like, oh, we can't do it because we need legislation to do it. And what Trump showed is we didn't need legislation. We need a new president with leadership. And on issue after issue, we're getting the job done. I think the biggest issue, to be honest with you, as we head into the midterms, whether it's MAHA or some of these affordability issues, is we're not talking about them enough. We need to go home and hammer these things back because Trump RX is massive. Think about what the president just said. So many of these drugs, we are now making them so much cheaper and easier to get, reducing your out-of-pocket costs, giving you access in ways that you haven't before. And for so many people that are dealing with a lot of these drugs that are the huge portion of their budget, it's massive. And I think if the White House is guilty of anything, it's not breaking through on enough of this to get that, to really kind of to make that an issue. So, but we need to do this. And frankly, members of Congress need to be doing this. I hear this all over, and you guys have heard me say this week after week. These guys act like Trump needs to do everything for them. Trump, they need to get the message. They're the ones running for Congress. It's a re-election or it's a midterm. They need to do a little. Anyway, beyond the president, it was J.D. Vance's turn in the barrel. He got to go out and do the briefing this week. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of people who are as it got ready, were like, how's he going to do versus how Rubio did and blah, 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 blah. And he walked out and I think just nailed this right off the bat, set the tone. This is him entering the briefing room and beginning his briefing, facing the reporters for the first time. Take a listen.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. How you guys doing? Good. Okay, I've got my cheat sheet here, so I know who to call on, most importantly, who not to call on. Let me start out with a few things. So first of all, proud to announce that next week I will be speaking at the Air Force Academy commencement ceremony. Last year, I spoke at the Naval Academy commencement.
All right, so you heard them. He had a little chart, and it was the seating chart of the briefing room. Now, I've told people this before, the briefing room is not as big as you probably think it is on watching from TV. It's 49 seats, 7 across, 7 back. And the front row is the correspondents for the major outlets. You've got NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, the New York Times, Washington Post, and then the Wire reporters, AP, Reuters. But it was just a funny way. You remember Marco walked out and he said, I don't know who's here. I'm just going to start pointing at people and naming. Well, the vice president needed obviously a different shtick. And that was just funny. I tweeted back at him, by the way. I said, I wish I had known there was a cheat sheet. I would have known who not to call on. It was a little bit of a different briefing room back then. But he went on. He had a great, funny quote because he was obviously standing in for Caroline as she's on maternity leave. So this is him remarking on his duties and his new role. I feel like everybody in the Trump administration has 18 jobs. And he was joking that it was his turn to be press secretary. Take a listen.
With that, I will say thank you all. It's cool to be here. I'm going to give a shout out, of course, to the person I am replacing today, Carolyn Levitt, who hopefully is at home enjoying some time with her beautiful kids. I told Carolyn I would stand in for her today for the White House press briefing on the condition that when Usha has our baby in July, that she would be vice president for a couple weeks. So thank you, guys.
Look, I think he did a fantastic job. He got a little overshadowed by the Texas primary endorsement that I mentioned a little while ago, but he brought a level of humor and levity. He was informative. He pushed back. There was one reporter that went after him, and he was like, "It's a gotcha question." I thought he did a really good job showing his prowess at the podium, and so I liked how he handled this. Kudos all around to the vice president for that. Anyway, real quick though, before I go, I want to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in California because there's two fascinating things out there. I mentioned this at the top of the show. One is this LA mayor's race that Spencer Pratt, I think, has just done a phenomenal job really talking about issues that matter to folks. They're still dealing with the fallout of this Palisades fire. And it's just sheer incompetence, to be blunt, right? The fire department not having the resources that they need and no one being held accountable because the Democratic Party has a stranglehold out there. And so Spencer Pratt, former reality star, used his celebrity to make this an issue. And I think that there's a very decent chance the number of people I hear in California who are really fed up with business as usual out there are done. And they're ready to give this guy a look. And then you look at the governor's race. And there is a real possibility. Now they're trying to figure out Javier Becerra, who is just a disaster as a member of Congress and Biden's HHS secretary. I mean, even members of the Biden cabinet won't endorse this guy. But here's the thing. You are now hearing people talking about, well, wait, we designed the system. We never thought Republicans could win. And so now there is a talk about a change because they have this top two system, like we talked about other places. Like the idea was they always thought, we'll definitely win. We'll either have two Democrats, we'll have a Democrat and a Republican, and then we'll always win. But guess what? Now that this potential of two Republicans is real, they're talking about potentially changing the system because, well, we don't want to ever allow a Republican to win. Take a listen.
This month, a new ballot initiative has been filed to repeal the state's top two primary and return it to a party-based primary where voters like you would only vote for candidates in your own registered party. Now, who's behind this effort? Well, the leader behind it and filed this with the Attorney General this month is Steve Maviglio.
Now, okay, so they've already decided that, but here's where it gets scarier. Gavin Newsom, who's largely stayed out of this, had this to say about what will happen if two Republicans make the runoff. Take a listen.
We all have agencies. We can shape the future. There's still a lot. Look, I've said this before, so I'll repeat it. I don't anticipate this need to be the case, but there is a break the glass scenario. And there's many people that have a deep understanding of what it would look like if Democrats were locked out. And we're going to do everything to make sure that doesn't happen. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, a break glass scenario if Democrats don't make the runoff. Doesn't that sound like rigging? No one's asking a question. How is that not a follow-up question? Break glass if they get locked out? That's the system. That's the law. And no one's asking what that means? Hello? I'm sorry. Am I the only one that thinks that that's insane? The guy, literally the governor, is saying if Republicans actually, the voters of California push two Republicans forward, we have a break glass scenario. And no one thinks that's a problem. I'm telling you guys, this should have set off alarm bells from everybody. And yet I haven't heard anything. It's crazy. So I'm telling you, I think we have this is something to keep an eye on. We're going to basically follow this for you because I don't think that we should just let this go. This is a big, big deal. Anyway, we've covered a lot of ground. This has been a great week in politics, a lot more to get to as we get closer and closer to the midterms. And we will continue to break down the midterms like nobody else, give you that insight that you're not getting from anywhere else because this is what I do for a living. I'm not a pundit. I am a operative. I'm in the game. I've got the sources. I love doing the show because I can break it all down for you in a way that no one else can. We can tune in every single night to the Sean Spicer Show on YouTube at 6 o'clock. We premiere the show. And then every morning at 8:30, we are live for the huddle on my YouTube channel. Feel free to tune in any of that. Thanks for kicking off your Sunday morning with us on Full Court Press here on ABC. I'm your host, Sean Spicer. I will see you back here next Sunday.